All right, so huge news this week. After the release of Claude Mythos, Trump is now in China having talks with Xi Jingping, and it looks like the two countries are actually about to come together and sign some sort of deal to cooperate on avoiding an AI disaster, which is in the interest of both sides, of course. And it seems like many people in the Trump administration who had previously completely dismissed these concerns are now worried. They are listening to the experts, and they are about to implement the regulation that the experts have been calling for to protect everyone on the planet.
Their large language models are increasing in power very, very quickly. We saw a step function jump with Anthropic Mythos. So the two AI superpowers are going to start talking. We're going to set up a protocol in terms of how do we go forward with best practices for AI. Our responsibility is to come up with the highest performance calculus where we can get the most innovation and the highest level of safety.
So that's the US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, and he has been talking to business leaders who are incredibly worried about the cybersecurity threat that Claude Mythos poses to their business. Scott Bessent is doing something better than that. He's going beyond, and he's anticipating the step function jumps that we will see in future models, right? So there's obviously a lot of focus on the capabilities of current models, but what people need to do is look at the trajectory, look at where AI is going, how powerful and dangerous it will be a year from now. And I'm beginning to think about what kind of threat that would pose to US national security and the well-being and lives of everyone on the planet. I'm beginning to think about what regulation they can put in place to actually mitigate those risks. So this is the time horizon benchmark from an organization called Meta, and it looks at the length of tasks that AI models are able to accomplish. So you see in 2022, when ChatGPT was released, they could only do tasks that take humans about 36 seconds. We then go to GPT-4 in March 2023, and that's at 4 minutes. And then we go up and up and up, and we're hitting super exponential growth in AI capabilities, right? So Claude Opus 4.6 was at 12 hours. That's the length of the task that it can do. Claude Mythos is now that good that this benchmark is no longer difficult enough so that we can accurately measure what Claude Mythos' capabilities are. So they can only say that it can likely do tasks of at least 16 hours of duration, but beyond that, we don't know. And if we continue to allow AI companies to keep scaling up the capabilities of their models with more and more compute, well, the next model that comes out is going to be even better than Claude Mythos. And remember, this is super exponential growth we are seeing. It's incredibly scary. Most of the experts are saying that we're going to have super intelligent AI that's better than all humans at everything in less than 5 years, right? So governments are beginning to see that. They're beginning to pull their fingers out, and they're thinking about what they can do to protect not just their citizens, but themselves, right? If we have AI that's more intelligent than all humans combined, that obviously poses an extinction threat, and politicians can see that, and they're beginning to talk to each other to see what they can do to pursue their shared interests of keeping humans around. And it looks like OpenAI might be beginning their redemption arc. So that they have come out and supported the idea of a global AI governance body led by the US and China, so they can do exactly that. So they can cooperate to mitigate these risks to prevent AI takeover. We even had Chris Lahan, who we've discussed before in his channel, incredibly shady figure, been engaged in some really disgusting, dirty political tactics. And he has come out and said something incredibly wise and needed. I never expected him to come out and say this. And he said AI in some level transcends a lot of the prevailing or traditional trade type of issues, referring to the kind of ongoing battle between the US and China, because of course they can compete as much as they want when it comes to technology that they can control. It's reasonable for the US and China to compete when it comes to basically every other technology, because that's technology that will benefit them the more of it that they have. But when it comes to AI, that the experts and the companies that are building it are warning us, they don't know how to control it, and they want to make it better than every human at everything. This is a different issue. This should not be treated as a trade war. This should not be treated as an arms race. This should be treated as the existential threat to humanity that it is, so that the US and China and other major powers can cooperate to stop those risks from materializing. Such an organization could resemble the IAEA, which is an organization that allows countries to cooperate to prevent nuclear proliferation. And it could be some kind of connection of the already existing AI safety institutes that exist around the world. And this is a huge step in the right direction. So it's rare that it will happen on this channel, but well done to OpenAI for throwing their support behind this. If you look at the various AI safety institutes that exist in different countries, see that we here in Britain have the best funded and best equipped, and who have been doing some of the best work on this. And America gives a fraction of the funding that we give to our AI safety institute. If the government just said, look, we're going to give you some more resources so that you can actually study the rapidly accelerating capabilities of AI models, their misalignment, that would be a step in the right direction. And then once these AI safety institutes start cooperating and collaborating, sharing information, that's when we can begin to have global rules that can ideally prevent the development of uncontrollable, self-improving superintelligence. But the good news doesn't stop there, because not only are the US and China beginning to cooperate, but in the United States itself, the Trump administration is beginning to rethink its previous stance of laissez-faire, minimal government intervention. They are considering an executive order that would force AI companies to give their models to the US government for testing before they're allowed to release them. This is something that apparently already exists in China. This is something that Labour in the UK promised they would do in the election, haven't done yet, because they wanted to align with American policy. So if they do this, we hopefully will now see the British government implement the same law. If this isn't signed, it's just ridiculous. An AI company should not be allowed to train and release this incredibly powerful model that could help someone build a bioweapon without the government making sure that, for example, it will remain loyal to at least humanity, if not specifically American interests. It's just absurd that we currently live in this world that these billionaires are able to run these companies and just pose a real extinction threat to all of humanity that these CEOs acknowledge exists, and they're just allowed to get away with it. And the government can't even step in and say, no, we're going to test and make sure that this model doesn't pose an existential threat to humanity. And if you ask the American voters what they want, 82% of them support this executive order and only 4% oppose it. So up until now, the AI companies themselves and their lobbying groups have been opposing all of these attempts to have just bare bones policy that attempts to make sure that these models are safe. People are rapidly coming to terms with the fact that people are pissed off with that. They understand, every poll we've had shows, they understand that there is a real extinction threat here, that they don't trust AI companies to get it right, and there needs to be government intervention. Now, unfortunately, just having the government test these models is not going to be enough to keep people safe, because we've already seen AI models, they know when they're being tested. So if they know when they're being tested, and if they were to present misaligned attitudes or a really dangerous capability that we didn't want, then they can simply lie on the test. They can say, oh no, I'm not actually capable of helping someone to build this bioweapon. I can't do that. When in reality they can. They can say, oh yeah, even though I'm placed in this scenario where you're trying to test me for misalignment, you're trying to, for example, get me to kill someone so that I can stay online, which we've already seen our models have failed that test. They have chosen to kill a human to preserve themselves. They can simply lie. They can pretend that they would act in the way that we want them to and not show that dangerous behavior so that they can get released. So when models are smart enough to know that they're being tested, our testing is then pretty much completely useless. So we can't rely on these tests as a measure to keep these models safe. But what we need is an international ban on the development of superintelligent AI, because that's the only way that we can ensure that these models aren't going to go rogue and kill us all. That's the warnings of people like Jeffrey Hinton. But measures like this are just common sense. They should have existed years ago. And it's very good that the US government is considering it. It's a step in the right direction. And from there, we can have stronger regulation that's going to make sure that those really bad eventualities don't come to pass. And so, as I mentioned, those more stringent measures, what's happened here in the UK very recently is Alex Sobel, who is a Labour MP, he's been working with Control AI, I think he signed their statement. He has proposed an amendment to a cybersecurity bill that would give the government the power to shut down data centres if AI goes rogue. This is an incredible development. I don't know what its chances of success are. I don't know what the timeline looks like, but this is huge. Obviously, the government should have the power to say, if there's an AI on this data centre that has the potential or has already begun to self-replicate and is posing all of these really severe threats to Britain's national security and to the lives of everyone in Britain, of course, our government should have the power to shut that data center down. Just as if someone was building a nuclear reactor in their shed, the government should come in and say, no, you're not allowed to do that, because if this goes wrong and it's very clear that you don't know how to control this nuclear reactor, that everyone in your town is going to die. And that is the case with AI companies. They don't know how to control their models. They're all on record saying, yeah, we don't really understand how this technology works. Yet the alignment problem remains completely unsolved, but we're just going to barrel on ahead anyway. So this is huge. Hopefully this can pass, and hopefully this can set a precedent for governments all around the world, that the government can say to AI companies that this is not on. That you can't just race to build self-improving superintelligence that you can't control without the government having a say on that and being able to stop you if they think you've gone too far. So all in all, a pretty bloody good week for the cause of AI not kill everyoneism. That's what we talk about on this channel. If you want to see more of these kinds of videos covering AI news with a focus on the extinction threat, then I humbly ask you to subscribe, like, leave a comment, all of that. and we'll see you in the next video.